The phone slammed against the wall, shattering into pieces that scattered across the hardwood floor like the last fragments of his patience. "You're nothing but a burden. Cameron, your choices are ruining this family and everything we built." His father's voice still thundered in his ears even after the line went dead. Cameron Hayes stood motionless in the middle of the living room of the two-story colonial house on Maple Lane in suburban Atlanta, Georgia, the same house where he had learned to ride a bike, celebrated birthdays, and eventually learned that love came with conditions he could never meet. At 28, he had a steady job as a graphic designer downtown, a decent paycheck, and a life he had fought hard to claim. But to Richard Hayes, none of it erased the fact that his only son was gay. Cameron's hand shook as he bent to pick up the broken phone. The screen was cracked, a spiderweb of fractures mirroring the cracks in his chest that had been widening for years. He had come out at 23 during a tense Thanksgiving dinner, and the fallout had never really stopped. His mother Elaine had hugged him through tears and then spent the next 5 years walking on eggshells between her husband and her son. His younger sister Lauren had tried to stay neutral at first, but lately she echoed their father's talking points about family values and God's plan. The neighbors whispered at block parties. The church he had grown up attending sent polite but pointed letters suggesting counseling. Cameron had learned to smile through it all, to keep his voice steady, to pretend the weight did not crush him every single day. The front door opened and Wesley Rivera stepped inside, shaking rain from his dark hair. At 30, Wesley carried himself with a quiet confidence a high school history teacher who had seen enough teenage drama to recognize real pain when it walked through his classroom door. His green eyes softened a moment they landed on Cameron. "I heard the yelling from the driveway. Another round with your dad." He set down his messenger bag and crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling Cameron into his arms without waiting for an answer. Cameron buried his face against Wesley's shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of coffee and chalk dust that always grounded him. "He called me a burden again. Said I'm the reason he can't sleep at night. That my lifestyle is destroying the family legacy. As if being who I am is some kind of crime." His voice cracked. "And the worst part, Wes, part of me still believes him sometimes." Wesley held him tighter, one hand stroking the back of Cameron's neck. "You are not a burden. You are the bravest person I know. You built a career from nothing after he cut off your tuition. You paid for this house's repairs when the roof leaked last winter. You show up for your mom even when it hurts." He pulled back just enough to meet Cameron's eyes. "This house isn't even theirs anymore. Remember, your grandmother's will made that clear." Cameron nodded slowly. 2 years ago, after his grandmother's funeral, the lawyer had read the will aloud in a small office downtown. The house, paid for by her life insurance and left specifically to Cameron because she had seen how Richard treated him, belonged to him outright. Richard had never told the rest of the family. He had simply continued living there, acting as if the deed still bore his name, collecting the emotional rent of guilt and obligation. Cameron had let it slide because confronting it meant burning bridges he was not sure he could survive crossing. Tonight, something shifted. The word burden echoed like a final verdict. Cameron stepped out of Wesley's embrace and walked to the antique desk in the corner. He pulled out the folder he kept hidden beneath tax documents. Inside lay the deed, the will, and the letter from the real estate attorney he had consulted 3 months earlier in secret. "I'm selling it, Wes. The whole thing. They think it's their house, their security, their legacy. But it's mine, and I'm taking it back." Wesley's eyebrows rose, but there was no judgment in his expression, only careful consideration. "That's a nuclear option. Your mom still lives here. Your sister brings the kids over every Sunday. You'll be the villain in every family story for the rest of their lives." "I know," Cameron said, his voice steadier than he felt. "But every time I walk through that door, I hear his voice calling me a burden. I can't keep paying that price. We've talked about moving to California, starting fresh where no one knows us as the Hayes family scandal. The equity from this sale would give us a real down payment, a chance to breathe. I'm tired of shrinking myself to fit their version of love. They sat together on the couch as rain pattered against the windows. Cameron traced the edges of the deed with his fingertip. Memories flooded in: Christmas mornings with his grandmother reading stories by the fireplace. The way she had squeezed his hand at his high school graduation and whispered, "Be who you are, no matter what they say." She had known. She had always known. Selling the house felt like honoring her faith in him, even if it meant breaking the family apart. By the time the rain stopped, Cameron had made the call to the realtor. The listing would go live in 48 hours. He hung up and turned to Wesley, who had not moved from his side. "I don't know if this makes me strong or selfish. All I know is I can't keep living like this." Wesley kissed his forehead. "We'll figure out the rest together. Whatever the cost. You're not carrying it alone." Cameron closed his eyes, letting the words settle. For the first time in years, the weight on his chest felt a fraction lighter. But he knew the storm was only beginning. The next morning's sunlight poured through the kitchen windows, painting the tile floor in warm rectangles. Cameron stood at the counter stirring sugar into his coffee while Wesley scrambled eggs. The familiar domestic rhythm, a small island of calm before the coming hurricane. The realtor had already scheduled a photographer for that afternoon. Cameron had spent half the night rehearsing conversations in his head: how to tell his mother, whether to warn his sister, what he would say when his father inevitably found out. Each scenario ended with raised voices and slammed doors. Wesley slid a plate in front of him. "You barely slept. Talk to me." "I keep seeing Mom's face when she realizes she has to move," Cameron admitted. "She's 62. This house is all she knows. Dad will blame her for not keeping me in line. And Lauren, she'll say I'm punishing the whole family for one person's bigotry." Part of me wonders if she's right. Wesley sat across from him. Fork paused midair. "Your grandmother left it to you for a reason. She watched your dad treat you like a project he could fix. She told me once, at that barbecue 2 summers ago, that you deserve to choose your own path. This isn't punishment. This is consequence." Cameron nodded, but the guilt nod anyway. He had spent years trying to earn his father's approval: straight-A student, varsity soccer, the engineering degree he never wanted but pursued because Richard had insisted. Coming out had been the final failure in his father's eyes. Now he was choosing himself, and the price tag felt enormous. By noon, the photographer had come and gone, capturing the house in its best light, the wraparound porch where Cameron and Wesley had shared countless quiet evenings, the backyard where Cameron had taught his niece to catch fireflies, the bedroom upstairs where he had cried himself to sleep the night his father first used the word disappointment. Every room held ghosts of both joy and pain. In the afternoon, they drove downtown to meet the real estate attorney again. The office smelled of lemon polish and fresh coffee. "Mr. Delgado reviewed the documents one last time. Legally, it's clean. Your father has no claim." But emotionally, he let the sentence hang. Cameron signed the listing agreement with a hand that only trembled slightly. When they stepped back into the bright Georgia sunshine, Wesley took his hand right there on the sidewalk. A woman walking her dog gave him a double take. But Cameron lifted his chin and kept walking. That evening, they cooked dinner together in the house that would soon belong to strangers. Wesley told stories about his own coming-out experience in a small Florida town, how his parents had eventually come around after years of awkward holidays. "It took time," he said, chopping vegetables with practiced ease. "But they chose me. Your family might not. You have to be ready for that." Cameron leaned against the counter, watching the knife rise and fall. "I've been ready since I was 16 and realized I liked boys more than girls. I just kept hoping they'd catch up." He swallowed hard. "What if selling the house makes me the monster they already think I am?" Wesley set the knife down and pulled him close. "Then we'll build a new story. One where you're not carrying everyone else's expectations on your back. One where we get to be happy without apologizing for it." They ate on the porch as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in oranges and pinks. Cameron's phone buzzed with a text for his mother asking if he was coming for Sunday dinner. He stared at the screen for a long moment before typing back a simple, "Not this week." The guilt twisted again, but beneath it something else stirred, resolve. Later that night, as they lay in bed with the ceiling fan turning lazily overhead, Cameron whispered into the dark, "I'm scared, Wes. But I'm more scared of waking up at 40 still trying to prove I'm worthy of their love." Wesley's arm tightened around him. "Then let's make sure that doesn't happen." The next morning, the listing went live. Within hours, the first offers started trickling in. Cameron refreshed the app every 30 minutes, watching the number of views climb. He felt like he was standing on the edge of a cliff, heart pounding, knowing the jump would change everything. The storm broke on Wednesday afternoon. Cameron was at his desk downtown when his phone started exploding with calls. First, his sister Lauren, voice shrill. "What the hell is this listing? Mom just saw it online. Dad is losing his mind." Then his mother, crying so hard she could barely speak. "Cameron, please tell me it's a mistake. This is our home." He drove back to the house with Wesley riding shotgun, both of them silent as the city blurred past. When they pulled into the driveway, Richard's truck was already there. His father stood on the porch, arms crossed, face thunderous. Elaine hovered behind him, eyes red. Lauren sat on the steps with her arms wrapped around her knees. "You sold our house?" Richard's voice boomed before Cameron even closed the car door. "Behind our backs? After everything we've done for you." Cameron climbed the steps slowly, Wesley at his side like a shield. "It was never yours, Dad. Grandma left it to me. You knew that." Richard's laugh was bitter. "That crazy old woman always favored you. But we've lived here 30 years. Paid the taxes. Fixed the pipes. Raised you kids. And now you're kicking us out because you're mad I won't celebrate your sin." The word landed like a slap. Cameron felt Wesley's hand brush his lower back, steadying him. "This isn't about celebrating anything. It's about me finally choosing my own life instead of shrinking to fit yours. You call me a burden. I'm removing the weight." Elaine stepped forward, voice trembling. "Honey, we can work this out. Your father didn't mean it. We love you." "Do you?" Cameron asked quietly. "Because love doesn't come with conditions like, be straight or else. Love doesn't make me hide who I am at Christmas dinner. Love doesn't call me names when I'm already bleeding inside." Lauren stood up. "You're being selfish. Mom and Dad have nowhere to go. What about the grandkids? Their backyard? You're destroying our family over your pride." The accusation stung, but Cameron had rehearsed this moment in his head for months. "I spent years destroying myself to keep this family together. Now it's my turn to live." Richard lunged forward, finger jabbing Cameron's chest. "You think money will fix this? You'll be the villain in every story we tell. No one will forgive you." Wesley moved between them, voice calm but firm. "Mr. Hayes, step back. This is Cameron's decision, and it's legal. Threats won't change that." The confrontation stretched for nearly an hour, voices rising and falling like waves. Neighbors peered from windows. By the time Richard stormed off, slamming his truck door so hard the whole street heard it, Cameron's shirt was damp with sweat and his throat raw. Elaine hugged him briefly, whispering, "I'm sorry," before following her husband. Lauren left without another word. Inside, Cameron sank onto the couch, head in his hands. Wesley sat beside him, rubbing slow circles on his back. "You did what you had to do. The guilt is normal. But staying would have killed you slowly." Cameron nodded, but the tears came anyway. He cried for the boy who had once believed his father's approval was the key to happiness. He cried for the mother caught in the middle. He cried because doing the right thing for himself felt so much like betrayal. That night, the first full-price offer came in. Cameron accepted it with shaking fingers. The closing date was set for 6 weeks away. The countdown had begun. The betrayal came from the least expected place. Cameron's cousin Marcus, who had always seemed like the cool older relative, posted on the family group chat a screenshot of the listing with a caption, "Some people choose money over blood." Within minutes, the chat erupted. Accusations flew. Old aunts called Cameron ungrateful. High school friends he had not spoken to in years sent private messages asking what was wrong with him. At work the next day, his boss pulled him aside. "I don't want to get involved in your personal life, but clients are asking questions." The optics, Cameron smiled tightly and promised to keep things professional. Inside, he felt the walls closing in. Wesley faced his own storm at school. A parent complained that the gay teacher dating the guy selling his family home was a bad influence. The principal called Wesley in for a meeting that felt more like a warning. Wesley came home exhausted, but he still cooked dinner and listened while Cameron paced the living room. "We knew there would be fallout," Wesley said, stirring pasta sauce. "But seeing it happen in real time is brutal." Cameron stopped pacing. What if they're right? What if I'm proving Dad correct by tearing everything apart? Maybe I am the burden. Wesley turned off the stove and took Cameron's face in both hands. "Listen to me. You are allowed to protect your peace. You are allowed to stop setting yourself on fire to keep other people warm. Your grandmother believed that. I believe that. The people who love you will come around or they won't. But either way, you get to live." They argued that night, not about the house, but about the cost. Cameron worried he was dragging Wesley into his family war. Wesley insisted he had signed up for the whole package, mess and all. In the end, they fell asleep tangled together, the argument dissolving into quiet reassurance and the kind of love that survives hard conversations. The following week brought more pressure. Richard filed a frivolous lawsuit claiming undue influence on the will. The legal fees started piling up. Cameron dipped into his savings, feeling the irony of spending money from the very sale that caused the fight. Wesley sold his motorcycle to help cover costs. Each sacrifice felt like another brick in the wall they were building toward freedom. One rainy afternoon, Cameron stood alone in the empty attic, sorting through boxes of childhood things. He found a photo of himself at 10, grinning beside his father at a baseball game. The man in the picture looked proud. Cameron wondered where that version of his father had gone. He tucked the photo into his pocket, a reminder that grief came in many forms. Community backlash reached its peak at the annual neighborhood block party. Cameron and Wesley had debated skipping it, but Cameron refused to hide. They arrived with a tray of brownies, determined to act normal. The moment they stepped onto the cul-de-sac, conversations died. People who had known him since kindergarten suddenly remembered urgent errands. Children were ushered away. An elderly neighbor who used to bake him cookies crossed the street to avoid them. Cameron stood tall, hand in Wesley's, smiling through the humiliation. Inside, he was crumbling. Later that night, he broke down in the shower, sobs echoing off the tile. Wesley joined him fully clothed, holding him under the spray until the water ran cold. "They don't get to define your worth," he whispered. "Only you do." The psychological toll deepened. Cameron started waking at 3 a.m., replaying every harsh word his father had ever spoken. He questioned every decision. Had he been too harsh? Should he have tried therapy with a family first? Wesley found him one morning staring at the listing photos, tears streaming. "I'm scared I'll regret this forever," Cameron admitted. Wesley sat on the floor beside him. "Regret is part of growth, but staying would have been regret with interest. You're choosing life over slow death. That's not selfish. That's survival." Slowly, small victories appeared. A new client reached out after seeing Cameron's portfolio, unaware of the drama. Wesley's students wrote anonymous letters of support after hearing rumors. Cameron's mother started texting him privately, small updates about her garden, testing the waters. Each message was a lifeline. The offer was solid, 10% above asking. Closing was scheduled for the following Friday. Richard's lawsuit had been dismissed, but the emotional damage lingered. Cameron spent the week packing boxes, each one a memory he had to decide whether to keep or let go. Wesley helped without complaint, labeling everything with his neat teacher handwriting. On Wednesday, Richard showed up unannounced with Lauren and two of her kids. They stood on the porch demanding to be let in. Cameron opened the door, but did not step aside. "You can't stop this," he said quietly. Richard's eyes were bloodshot. "You're really going to put your mother on the street? She's moving in with Lauren until she finds a place. I already paid first and last month's rent for her. I'm not heartless, Dad. I'm just done being your punching bag." Lauren glared. "You think money fixes betrayal? You're dead to me." The words hurt, but Cameron had heard them before in different forms. He closed the door gently and leaned against it until their car pulled away. Wesley waited in the hallway, arms open. They stood there for a long time, breathing together. That night, Cameron dreamed of his grandmother. She smiled and said, "You're finally flying, sweetheart." He woke with tears on his pillow, but a strange sense of peace. Closing day arrived bright and clear. Cameron and Wesley met the buyers at the title company. Papers were signed in a conference room that smelled of fresh coffee. When the final signature was inked, Cameron felt something inside him release. The house was no longer his burden to carry. They drove back to Maple Lane one last time. The moving truck was already loading the last boxes. Richard, Elaine, and Lauren stood on the lawn like a tableau of grief and rage. Richard stepped forward as Cameron climbed out of the car. "You happy now?" he spat. "You took everything." Cameron looked at his father for a long moment, seeing the man not as the monster, but as the product of his own fears. "I didn't take anything that wasn't mine. I'm sorry you can't see that love doesn't have to look like control. I hope one day you understand." Elaine hugged him quickly, whispering, "I'm proud of you," before Richard pulled her away. Lauren refused to meet his eyes. As the truck pulled out, Cameron stood on the empty porch with Wesley, watching the only home he had ever known disappear around the corner. They spent the night in a hotel, too drained for anything but holding each other. Cameron cried again, but the tears felt cleansing this time. 6 months later, Cameron and Wesley stood in the balcony of their new apartment in San Diego, watching the Pacific stretch endlessly under a cloudless sky. The California sun warmed their skin. Cameron's new job at a design firm was thriving. Wesley had found a teaching position at a progressive charter school. They had friends who celebrated them without reservation. The nightmares had faded. Cameron still talked to his mother every Sunday. She had settled into a small condo near Lauren and was slowly rebuilding her own life. Richard had not spoken to him since closing day, but Cameron had stopped waiting for the call. The silence no longer felt like failure. It felt like freedom. One evening as they cooked dinner together, Wesley asked, "Any regrets?" Cameron thought about the house, the fights, the tears, the price they had all paid. He thought about the boy who once believed he had to earn love and the man who finally understood he deserved it freely. "Some days I miss the porch in the backyard, but I don't miss the version of myself that lived there. I'm finally living, Wes. Really living." Wesley kissed him softly. "That's all your grandmother ever wanted for you." They ate on their small balcony as the sun set, painting the ocean gold. Cameron raised his glass. "To choosing ourselves." In the quiet that followed, one question lingered in Cameron's mind. The same question he knew would echo for anyone who heard their story, true or false. When family calls you a burden for being who you are, is selling the house they believed was theirs an act of cruelty, or the only way to finally set everyone free?